I remember watching a video. I think it was like Dateline or 60 Minutes. I don't remember what program it was, but they had IDEO create a shopping cart, and the thing was awesome. And the team they had was just like, like I said, a psychologist, a fine artist.
Online shopping cart or?
No, like an actual shopping cart like you would have in a grocery store. The thing was, just to describe it, I mean, the display was electronic, which was kind of cool. But the amazing feature was, because they were again, it was research driven. They were studying how people were actually, using shopping carts. Because I mean, think about how deep a shopping cart is. You can't put your stuff on top of each other; it gets all crumbled up. Like bread or whatever. So really, you have a lot of vertical space that isn't even being used by your shopping cart. So what they did is on the back, I think, there was like some kind of little, or maybe they said you just have it, on the, okay. Those little small little, when you go into a store and you only need like a few things, you don't carry a shopping cart, you get like one of those little baskets. Yeah. So basically you can take those baskets, but they have like, the shopping cart has a couple of bars that you can just slide those baskets onto there. So basically the shopping cart was, segmented baskets, double decker, that allow you to store more groceries and not have the stuff get squished. The thing was brilliant. I'm like, I want to be like that. That is awesome. But I also liked video games, and I really wanted to do video games, and video games are created by multidisciplinary people. You have the very, very technical side of it, of the programmers and the the interface designers and the game designers and the artists. And architecture for the level design and all this stuff. It was crazy. I was like, man, this is going to be awesome. What would happen if I took this, graphic design process and applied it to entertainment? Like what IDEO is doing. So I started doing a lot of research of IDEO, how their process works, which is where I learned about the T-shaped people principle, which a T-shaped person is someone who has a very wide understanding of the world around them, but then there's that one thing that they're really good at. So they can be very, very deep in one aspect of what they're good at, but then
it's like a jack of all trades, except for one trade they're an expert in.
Yeah, well, they're jack of all trades, which allows them to actually communicate with people.
But then the one thing that their emphasis is they're a pro, they're an expert at that one thing. But they know enough about everything else that they can talk to anybody and speak their language.
Yeah. So that's how IDEO hires, is they have their teams are made up of a bunch of T-shaped people. And then you have Valve, and their story was very interesting. They were working on the original Half-Life, and their game sucked. Not the released version, of course. The game was awesome. But when they were developing it, it was just awful. And they were trying, and they were talking to other people in the industry, and they were like, "Why is this game sucking?" And it's like, "Well, you need a good you need like this rockstar game designer." And then they started listing off all these things that a rockstar game designer needs to help pull the project together, to help direct it. And as it turns out, all of these qualities you cannot find in one person. They were even trying to buy people away from other companies. But they couldn't find anyone that even matched the criteria of what people said a rockstar game designer is. So they came to the conclusion that such a person does not exist. And so what they ended up doing was they adopted the engineering process of come up with a concept, create a prototype, get feedback, and then you just reiterate it. You just follow this loop of concept, prototype, test, and then it just goes into this loop. And they developed this thing called the Cabal process, which is basically you don't have one rockstar game designer. You create a small team to attack one specific problem. So you have one of the top programmers, one of the top artists, one of the top sound guys. You have like the writer in there, and you just form this team to attack this one project.
And then they lock them in a room. They have these little cabal rooms that,
Yeah, yeah,
You're not allowed to leave here until your problem is solved.
yeah. And the way they do their beta testing is they would have the Cabal, they would move them into this room, and they would just bring some random guy at like GameStop or something to come in. He signs the NDA or whatever, and they have them play test this part of the game. And the Cabal, the game designers plural, they can't say anything. They just have to sit and watch this guy completely miss that left turn again and again and again and again. They're like, all right, we can't do this anymore. This is something wrong with this gameplay concept. Or if like people don't get it, And when you actually see someone playing a game and you can play test it, and then you're like, because the thing is like with things that are you would like in art, you would think a lot of it is subjective. Is that the right word?
Yeah.
Where it's just your opinion, and there's a lot of opinions that go on when you're designing something. But when you actually put it in front of a random person and they don't get it, or they don't understand the gameplay mechanic, there's no issue as far as what is right and what's wrong. It's not subjective anymore, it's objective. You have proof through the gameplay test that this person's idea did not work, or that your idea did not work. So you're like, all right, that didn't work, let's try something else.
You see that in graphic design, or even all over the art world all the time, where you have this idea or this art piece, and then you'll see on the artist statement where they want to communicate this emotion, this represents this, and this the sunset is sadness and all this other stuff. And you look at the piece and you're like, I don't see any of that.
Yeah, it's like, what the?
Yeah, and so then the artist expects you to have this deeper meaning out of the piece, and none of that meaning's really there. It all exists in the artist statement, and that's a failure of communication. But then you look at something out of Picasso. He had that, what was that massacre that he had?
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
You know which one I'm talking about?
Yeah, the very large black and white.
Yes, that very big one.
The town that got bombed.
Yeah, it was all like monotone color. I don't think it was black and white, but it was all the same colors. And this was very abstract. Now Picasso's one of those where if he wanted to, he could go in there and paint very realistically and have it be dead on, look like a photograph. And he did it in his early career. But man, that guy understood, communication, how to get this stuff to work. He had that painting. It's very abstract. It's still representational. You can tell, oh, that's a bull and that's a guy that's suffering and all this stuff. But it managed to communicate in such a powerful way. I mean, you look at this thing, you know exactly those people are suffering. They're going through a really rough time. Now, you may not know the historical context of this, but that's just because there is a context for the painting, not necessarily, And I guess there's a difference between you need to have a context to get the meaning versus the meaning isn't there at all.
Yeah.
But even without context, I can see that this is about a terrible event. There's suffering and stuff like this in this piece that is non-representational. I see the joke where people are like, someone needs to tell Picasso that the world doesn't really look like that. No, it doesn't really work that way. It's about communication, and he nailed it. It's not that it has to be perfectly representational. It's just that it has to communicate. And in this case, with this video game thing, where you need to be able to have the player to get them to perform a certain action or get them to solve a puzzle or something like that. And you need to communicate to them, what do you do? How do you get them to look up?
Yeah. How do you get them to look up? How do you get them to turn left? How do you teach them that, this magnetism device, how does this work? Kind of a thing. But yeah, it's, and because I think it was just kind of a fundamental thing that they decided to do with the Valve games is to have as little exposition, as little text in your face. This is how you're supposed to do this tutorial thing,
Which makes it way better. I mean, if you can show and not tell, and I know that's a cliche in the writing world, show, don't tell, but you can take it overboard. But yeah, you don't want them to. You want them to be immersed, and as soon as you have text on the screen, that immersion is gone. Or you have a character sitting there talking to you. You have a little talking head. Now your immersion is gone.
Yeah, or even if they tell you to, you have a character in a game that tells you to press B on the controller.
I love that one.
Oh, right. I am playing a video game, aren't I? Instead of, the Valve games, just play them. They're so good. When is episode 3 gonna come out? Urgh. Anyway,
Well, and remember a couple weeks ago, someone made an announcement that it had become official that that was not going to come out in 2010.
yeah, yep, yeah. So, anyway, Valve, awesome company. I was just, when we're starting this studio, and at the time we were still pretty convinced that we were going to do video games at some point, because of all the people who were involved, and also we loved what Pixar was doing, and so I was trying to learn, what their process was, and what was interesting is because IDEO had this graphic design process, Valve's process was inspired by engineering. And then I looked at Pixar's process, and without going into too much detail, as far as how Pixar is run, because I think we've already done this, but and much has been said about it. But the thing that's interesting is when you look right down to it, Valve, IDEO, Pixar, with a few little minor variations just because of the medium that they're working in.
It's the same thing.
It's the same thing. So I was like, oh, I'm going to apply the graphic design process to, entertainment, and we're going to be awesome. Yeah, Pixar already did that. I'm like, oh.
But look at what it did. I mean,
Yeah, and what we learned from that. Yeah, and what we learned from that, and this is like what we built our, what we're building our studio upon.
Our whole company's built on this idea. Everything that we do, we get everybody together and we bounce ideas off of each other, and mudslinging, sarcasm.
Yeah, there's a lot less sarcasm now.
We're kind of growing out of the sarcasm, but we still have some fun.
Yeah,
we still joke around.
Yeah, nothing wrong with a little joshing here and there.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, so it's. And I think at the time we were still trying to figure out what we want to do as a studio, like what was our, what was the key thing we wanted to do. And at the time, while we were still all in Rexburg, we wanted to do something that was multidisciplinary because I wanted to do video games, Brian wanted to do video games, you wanted to just tell stories.
That's why. You're noticing a pattern with me.
Yeah, and Shane wanted to do some design work, and I think all of us were really interested in doing something that was was educational. And even
I don't
though
mind doing things educational, I like helping other people.
Yeah, well, look what we're doing now.
Yeah,
with the Animation Academy,
What do you know?
Everything comes full circle. So it's like, yeah, we started teaching.
I think that's part of the reason why I was kind of excited about that project. Is like, hey.
Yeah, it does kind of take us back to the Blender workshops, which
it does. But the Blender workshops were fun. I taught it for a while towards the end there.
Yeah, after I graduated and couldn't actually technically teach those classes, Adam took over.
Yeah.
Workshops, I should clarify, they weren't actually classes; they were workshops, but.
Yeah, there were workshops. It kind of fell apart after a while, though, because people, they get busy. The first week would have a full lab, and the next week half were gone. Next week after that, half of those were gone. Next week after that, half of those were gone. And pretty soon, as you exponentially decrease, I was the only one sitting there in the lab like a doofus, and like, no one's here. Yeah,
and after a while, I think now that people kind of knew that, all right, this animation, this 3D modeling workshop thing is still around. So, because the first 2 semesters it was huge, and then after that it started to become a little bit less. People are like, oh, okay, yeah. Everyone who was interested in it had already at least showed up like once or twice.
Yeah.
So yeah,
and I'm sure if that were to happen now, I'm sure that the same thing could happen again. Enough time has passed.
Mm-hmm.
But it would end up with the same results. I mean, it would be really big the first week, and then the next week, like half of those would be there and exponentially decrease until only the instructor is left.
Yeah. So, but those were fun times.
Oh yeah, it was fun. Shoot.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I think, so yeah, it was October 2007. That was when we came up with the name Lumaglyph. Which you can probably figure out what the name of that means.
Yeah. Glenn's such a good record keeper. He knows the dates that all these things happen.
Yeah, and then
I just kind of go along with the flow. I just want to push to the end, and Glenn's like, I'm going to go write my journal.